Well, let's get an independent assessment of the Liberal campaign platform from my next guest. Kevin Page was Canada's first parliamentary budget officer. He's now the president of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa. Mr. Page, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. So let me start with your overall assessment of the costing and the credibility of the Liberal Party's election platform. And to be clear here, we're not asking you to reflect on the choices they're making about spending, just whether the numbers add up and whether the assumptions are right. So where do you land on that?
The numbers add up, and I think the assumptions are the assumptions of the Parliamentary Budget Officer for the underlying baseline, and they've made good use of PBO costing. So, is it a credible fiscal plan? They're adding about $30 billion to the stock of debt over the next 5 years. So they're increasing the deficit. They're saying that their fiscal rule is going to continue to be a declining debt to GDP ratio, and if they can achieve that over the next 5 years, that would put them in relatively good standing internationally and with credit rating agencies.
Okay, so let's walk through how you assess these platforms based on 3 measures, and let's quickly go through them. What's the assessment of the use of realistic and credible economic projection? I guess that's the question. Is the foundation for the platform good?
I think it's a good foundation. They definitely get a pass on those assumptions. They use PBO's baseline. Again, where we don't give them a high grade is there's not a lot of talk about economic and fiscal challenges that go beyond we need to address affordability issues for the middle class. We need to strengthen the middle class. So we don't hear a lot about Canada's productivity challenges or competitiveness challenges. So we didn't give them a good grade on that side. On the fiscal side, there's a sense that basically that there's a lot of fiscal room to maneuver, and they're choosing to use it. I think there's, from an economist perspective, some will debate, well, the economy is doing fine. The economy is growing. We're up 1.5%. The unemployment rate's below 6%. Do we really need to see deficits going up over the next couple of years? So they don't really talk in those sorts of terms. So we gave them a pass, but not a good score on those assumptions.
Right. I mean, the assumption, they talk about their fiscal anchor, and it's this debt to GDP ratio. And as long as they continue to drive that down, they seem to be pretty much saying we'll spend whatever we want or need to spend to make Canadians happy. Any concerns about that? I mean, and I guess I'm wondering, in this climate, are we ever going to talk about the need for balanced budgets again? The other parties, the Greens and Conservatives, talking about balancing in 5 years, and I don't know how easy that's going to be with those numbers staring at them. But have we pretty much been conditioned now to deficits are okay?
I think we are conditioned that modest deficits are okay, and for the most part, the deficits over the medium term are modest. They're less than 1 percentage point of GDP. So if you think about in the United States, those deficits in the 4 and 5%, and a 1% deficit to GDP is a lot lower than most OECD countries. And when we do the longer term analysis, are we fiscally sustainable with this fiscal track? I think the PBO, IMF, Finance Department would say yes. We're still fiscally sustainable. I mean, I think to your point, though, I think there should be a debate. How big should these deficits be? There is a discussion in different parts of the world about how we use monetary policy and fiscal policy. There seems to be, it's okay for the Governor of the Bank of Canada to cut, interest rates even lower. And, there's a limit to how successful monetary policy could be to stimulate the economy. So could you make the case, can economists debate, saying, why not run a modest deficit, even increase the deficit? So just get this better balance between monetary and fiscal policy. And I think that part is a fair debate.
Okay. You and I have talked in the past about concerns when you were the parliamentary budget officer about structural deficits, and I guess when you see continuing, and so everybody understands, right, the continuing chronic deficits where there aren't enough ways to bring in enough revenue to meet your expenses. Do you look at these numbers and have any concern about that this could lead us to a structural deficit? Some of these program announcements are long term, and if they stay, how are we going to meet them?
We do have a modest or small structural deficit. I think the Department of Finance admits that when they release their fiscal reference tables annually. And so it is structural, so the government's going to actually have to take actions, to cut spending further or to increase revenues even more than they've increased them. But again, it's small, so we think that the structural deficit is less than 1 percentage point of GDP. If you think about where it was in the 1980s when Canada ran into a debt to GDP problem, it was probably, again, 4 or 5 percentage points of GDP. So again, as long as we keep it small and in this context of low interest rates, So, the carrying cost of interest, it continues to go down, even though we're adding to the stock of debt because these interest rates are just ridiculously low.
The current parliamentary budget officer does raise some concerns about some of the assumptions the Liberals have made here in terms of revenues from some of these taxes they brought in, including this 10% tax on luxury goods. The concern being, well, we're not sure you're going to get that much money from these taxes and whether there'll be that kind of take up and so on. Do you share some of those concerns?
Yeah, I think it's a good practice that the Parliamentary Budget Office highlights where they feel that there's just a lot of uncertainty. So, introducing new taxes definitely raises that issue. On some of the issues, like maybe the luxury tax, I think the reduction to or the limit on the amount of interest that could be deducted by corporations. I think there is higher levels of uncertainty. Some of the other measures on revenue-raising measures with respect to housing, maybe a little bit less so because we have provinces that have similar measures. But yeah, I think we need to recognize that there is uncertainty as well. The government is saying, or the Liberal Party rather, is saying that they could find savings, $2.5 billion a year, just through reviews. This is a platform, not a budget, so we think it's okay to signal that. And then as we move forward to the budget, we're going to need to refine these numbers.
So when you hear a language in a platform that says, yeah, we can find savings, we know where to find savings, what do you think? I mean, should they show us where? Should they be talking in a platform? Is that necessary?
Yeah, I think
to give people an idea, okay, here's what we're thinking of getting rid of to pay for these other things.
I think we have more confidence when there's more discussion about what is the base for defining these savings, what's the governance process. I think here they commit to releasing evaluations on their findings so that we'll know a little bit why they're choosing these sorts of cuts. They make the argument that they found roughly $3 billion a year in tax expenditures through the last review exercise. So they can, they think there's more to be there. We think it's a good thing that they're reviewing and they continue to review and try to target savings. But yeah, is there risk around those numbers because they're unspecified? Absolutely.
All right, Kevin Page, always good to talk to you. Thanks.
Good to talk to you.